Here? Good. I was checking. I was like, all right, great. Glad that you're here. Happy to be with you. Had a great time in the first service and happy to see you here. I said to the first service, I was really happy that Jay expanded on the announcements and took more time, because when I heard him say that you raised $40,000 to save storks, I was like, I've been to some places where they raise money for kittens and stuff, but storks? Never heard that. So, I looked up, I said, oh, okay, now I get it. So sometimes the announcements are worth dragging out a bit and make sure. Glad you raised so much money for storks. Fantastic. Happy to be with you. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I love and respect your pastor. He's a dear friend of mine. We meet monthly and sometimes more than that. And I've known him for a long time. And I love and respect the man and think highly of him. I've pastored for 30 years, and about 4 years ago stepped out of that, and I do real estate and a couple other things, and I only fill in for guys like Jeff and a couple guys that I know. You got to understand that when you do this every week, it's a really tough thing. It's a really tough thing. I just want to be transparent and tell you. And it's equally as tough when you haven't been doing it, because I have about 5 hours of material that I want to tell you, because it's all stored up, right? It's all right there, and I want to share all this with you. And then the more I think about the material and how great the material is right here, I'm like, who am I to bring this? I really have nothing to say. So hopefully this morning, the stuff that God has planted in my heart and in my soul, that I can just transfer that to you in the short time that we have together, and that God will make it real to us. You've been in a series about the names of God, and there's something critical about a name, isn't there? It's descriptive, and when you read through the Old Testament, the names of God really describe the character of God and who God is. And even to this day, names are important, and they stick with you. I'm the firstborn of 3. My parents, European descent. I came along, and they decided to name me Norbert. Yeah, see, you're already getting the point. Along came my brother. They named him Gary. And then came my sister, and they named her Linda. And then I grew up, and I thought, well, why couldn't you guys learn that the first time around? How difficult could that be? Right? So I have to explain every time. I go by Norb, short for Norbert. It's with a B. Except if I'm in a good coffee house, I grab the coffee if it's close. Could be Norm too. But there's something really, really identifying in a name, right? It even describes people. You know people by their names. There's something about that. And in the Old Testament, that descriptor of God really defines his character and helps us to understand who God is. So I'm really delighted that you guys are going through that. This morning we're on the name of God, Elkanah, which is the jealous God. Now, the minute you hear the word jealous, it conjures up a negative, doesn't it? So when we think of, in our culture, when we think of jealous or jealousy, it conjures up this idea that, somebody's got a car that you do a double take at and you wish you had that guy's car or that gal's house or that job or, that boyfriend, girlfriend you're jealous of, and all kinds of things. You and I, we could spend some time talking about what it's like to be jealous and those feelings. In fact, I intentionally this morning wanted to help you with that. I was going to bring a picture of my grandkids and post that up there, and I thought, no, I'm just going to lead you right into that jealousy thing, so that's why I'm not posting it, okay? So, I'm trying to restrict that. We get that, right? Jealous, what it means to be jealous. However, there is a complete opposite of that, and the scripture helps us to understand what that means when we identify God, his name Elkanah, as a jealous God. So what kind of jealous God is he, and what does it mean for us today? So I'm going to give you 3 short points, and I'm going to illustrate it through some of my own experiences as a father and as a grandfather, and I hope I can sink that thought into your mind. The first one is that God is jealous that we fully experience his love. One of the great theologians, J.I. Packer, said, God's jealousy is not a compound of frustration, envy, and spite, as human jealousy so often is, but appears instead as praiseworthy zeal to preserve something supremely precious. Now, I'm a father of 4. My kids are all grown adults, and my daughter's the oldest, and she has blessed us with 3 grandbabies, 8, 6, and 6 months old. And I've over the years, as a father, you experience some things that kind of give you glimpses about the heart of God. But I'll confess, I'll be totally transparent with you, that was very limited in my case. You know, as a dad, you're thinking about feeding and providing, and you're disciplining, and at times you're trying to scrape them off the ceiling, and they're going crazy, and you're like, man, you know, there's just so much homework. Why didn't they? My daughter was a homework fanatic. We had to go into her teacher and say, my daughter's not doing 4 hours of homework. She's doing 2. That's it. Done. You know, we had some really bizarre challenges, and then a couple kids were special needs, and we had to do, there's a lot going on. When I became a grandfather, sort of the light bulb went on, and all of a sudden I started to see things sort of the way God sees us. And I'm really thankful for that. And I don't know whether that's because I was a pastor for so many years and my brain thinks that way, but man, I got to be honest. When Sophie, our eldest granddaughter, first came, there was something inside me that instantly went to this deep, ravenous, passionate, jealous love for Sophie. Here's sort of what it looks like. I could see Sophie from the distance, and I'm like, oh man, I could just eat you up. I could just, you know, and it's just like, in fact, one time when my daughter came over, she left the blanket, Sophie's little blanket, and I picked up that blanket and was like, oh, it just hit me, that the aroma of Sophie on the blanket. I took a kind of a selfie with that and sent it to my daughter, and she's like, oh, that's a bit creepy. That's weird that you'd send that. I was like, not if you're the poppy, because I can smell her, and that whole thing that just, it's hard to describe unless you're a brand new parent or unless you are a poppy or a grandma. Now, what's your name? Jay? Javen. I had my eye on Javen, okay? So I was sitting over there, see this beautiful little newborn, and Mom gets up and, you know, Javen's holding the baby. Mom's like, okay, give me the baby. I'm going to go out there. And Javen just kind of nuzzles in. It's like, do I have to? Really? Like, I'm over there, and I'm almost getting weepy. I'm like, oh, my gosh, that newborn dad, that baby. I want to show you an illustration that I came across just on social media, and again, it just hit me. Like, this is this beautiful, you know, when we think of God's love, you know, we want to go instantly, for example, to Romans 5:8. God demonstrated his love to us while we were sinners. You know, Christ died for us, and that's good. But I want to take you one step back. Let's have a look at this short little video. Now, I'm gonna come out the gate really strong here, okay? When we're talking about a jealous God, we are talking about a God who, before the foundation of the earth, who sustains all of creation. Have you seen those new videos and stuff about the, you know, not Hubble, but one of the other NASA, the latest one, about out in the universe? Like, it's stunning. You can't even hardly wrap your brain around that and go, it's massive. And then you start reading that the heavens and the earth declare the glory of God. And then you look at the Father, who before the foundation of the heavens and the earth, like Jeremiah, had called you out, known you by name, and loves you with a jealous love. That kind of love where God looks at you and goes, man, I knew you. I love you. If Mom comes to take you away, I'm hesitating. That's the kind of deep, ravenous, jealous love God has for his creation. Do you get that? Let's watch it one more time.
I've waited 100 years, and I'd wait 1,000,000 more for you.
Oh, I just love that. I just love that. There's hardly a time that goes by that I don't look at a newborn. I'm a sucker for newborns. 0 to 3 months, I have a really hard time. You can ask my wife. It's like when they start crying, I'm like, I'm out of here. It just right here. It's just like, oh, But after that, like 4 months and on, like I am just a sucker for them, and I just want to pull them in. And it's like, oh, I just can't get enough. And the more you experience that as a human being, and particularly as a poppy, something clicks where you go, the amazing love of God, this jealous God that loves us so deeply. So now let's have a little bit of a deeper look. One, he's jealous that we fully experience his love for us. Now you might remember this and remember these words. Friedrich Lehmann, the old hymn writer, said, could we with ink the ocean fill? Now think of this, right? Picture the imagery. Could we with ink the oceans fill, and were the skies of parchment made, were every stalk of earth a quill, and every man a scribe by trade, to write the love of God above would drain the ocean dry, nor could the scroll contain the whole, though stretched from sky to sky. See, what God desperately wants for us, when we're talking about a jealous God, we're talking about a God who desires for us to experience his love. To experience his love. And again, I want to drive home the imagery of when I look at my grandchildren, right? And not to belittle the relationship with my kids, it's the same, but again, just driving home the point with the grandkids, just something clicks there where just that assimilation of understanding God's love. No matter where they are, no matter what they do, no matter how they think about me at a moment, if I've called them out of the pool and I'm not very happy because Poppy's called them out of the pool and they'd rather keep swimming, my love for them is unchanging, unconditional, and will never waver. Do you understand that? It will never waver. God desires for us to experience his unwavering, unchanging love that is deeper than we could fathom. And if you try to describe it, if the ocean was ink and you pulled and drew everything out of that to describe that in the sky, you couldn't begin to describe God's love for his creation. Secondly, this jealous God desires that we fully experience his joy. His joy. So not only his love, but his joy. Now, our culture promotes this idea of joy, and I'll use the word happiness as well, right? So be happy. Everybody wants to be happy. We want a life that's happy. And so we draw imagery around that sort of inculcates this whole idea of joy and happiness, right? And sometimes we paint things that aren't quite accurate. I, like your pastor, have Canadian roots, and I remember many times I've seen on television, whether it's through a show or through a movie, you land at LAX, and somehow you land at LAX and magically end up at the beach with all these wonderful palm trees and then you land it the first time at LAX and you get out of there and you're like, well, it's not quite that, right? You go through some rougher parts, you're like, oh, it takes me a little bit to get to the ocean and get through those areas of life, right? So the idea, if God desires for us not only to experience his love, but to experience his joy, how do we get it? How do we maintain it? And how do we nurture it? Well, we have to resist sort of this idealistic imagery of what joy and happiness is, and we need to dig in a little deeper. Let me simplify it by saying this. A jealous God invites us to surrender completely to him, that we might have our hearts, our minds, and our soul, our very being, experience the fullness of his love so that we might also experience joy that he deposits in us. Joy because of the relationship. So, again, using the analogy, so my love for my grandchildren this way never changes, ever. Right? But the joy that they can experience in receiving that love and reciprocating that love makes the whole relationship different, doesn't it? So as a poppy, there's this desire that I have that when I call the grandkids over and they come and hug me, I want to push pause in that moment and go, let's freeze frame this like forever, right? Because I'm enjoying it to the max. So the desire that I have to love them and that my jealousy in a good way for them never changes. It's rock solid. It will never change no matter what happens. But the invitation to experience this love and this joy in this togetherness happens when there's a reciprocating response where they hear my voice, where they come to me, where they're embraced, where they sit on my lap, where they are the benefactors of everything that I want them to have, not just at a distance, but up close. The joy is complete when there's a surrender of the heart, where there's a surrender of the mind, where there's a surrender of the very being, our souls, that God comes and fulfills and deposits in us himself, his presence. Think about that. Now we hear these words in John 15, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Now, this morning, I'm going to leave it to your pastor to dig into all the theology about God's justice and a righteous God and a God that corrects us, and that's true. And as a grandfather and as a grandmother, there's times where we have to correct. That's not our primary job, but we don't let him get away with murder, right? So there's correction that takes place, and you do that in a loving way. A jealous God not only invites us to experience his love and his joy, but in that joy there's a measure of this is how this relationship is nurtured at its maximum, and reciprocating that love is also coupled with the road that you should travel, the commands that you should keep to experience that full joy. And so in that is the tension between understanding that kind of ravenous love, reciprocating it, and at the same time participating as we relinquish heart, mind, and body and soul and all that we are, that we live out God's commands in our lives. Thus we experience the fullness of God's joy. And that's what God wants for us. And too often, sometimes before we come to faith, or sometimes in our early understanding of who God is and the Creator, we see him as, kind of wanting to dog people and, do this, don't do that. And we miss this sort of grandfatherly, I love you, I desire you, and there's nothing I wouldn't do to keep loving you, and there's nothing you can do to change that. But I'm inviting you to a pathway that encourages not only the reciprocating love, but commands that keep you on the path to experiencing the fullness of joy. And they work together, right? So first of all, God's love. God wants to experience his joy. And thirdly, and finally, God, this jealous God, is jealous for our well-being. In Deuteronomy 6:13, the Lord declares that we might follow his commandments, that all may go well with you. Now think about that phrase, that as we again reciprocate that and follow God's commands, that all may go well with you. Now again, if I take it to its simplest point in my relationship with the grandkids, you look and go, of course I love them passionately, but that love also has feet to it that my prayer for them is that all would go well, right? That they do well in school, that they do well physically and spiritually, and that I participate as a grandfather in nurturing that and helping them along that way, and we teach them lessons, and they learn, not as a primary, they get that from their parents, but we participate in that. And I began to see that that's really the purpose that's behind this idea of a jealous God, that as he instructs us to keep his commands, that he desires to bless us, and that we are then the recipients of physical and emotional, spiritual blessing by this God that ravenously loves us. Think about that. In the New Testament, Sermon on the Mount, we see that expanded, right? Where Jesus says that there is tremendous blessing. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who meek, who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart, the peacemakers, and those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. And when you sort of unpack that, following out of the Old Testament, you get this distinct understanding that this jealous God, yes, he does love us passionately, and nothing will change that. That he commits everything that he has, goes on the cross for us to demonstrate that love. That he wants us and desires for us to participate in his joy, but that he also, through his law and commands, paves a pathway for us to follow so that we might experience as a whole person spiritual, physical, and emotional blessing, that blessing of God. It's impossible to miss, both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, that God is jealous for the well-being of his people. Love, joy, and he's jealous for our well-being. There's more that we could talk about in relation to that, but I've chosen to kind of, ink this in by a video that it's probably about 4.5 years old. I don't want to say exactly because my wife will shout out exactly when it was, maybe 4 years, 5 years ago, something like that. The kids are younger, but my wife, Kathy, was walking down the sidewalk in front of our house, and I just pulled out the video, just a video. Hey, the grandkids are walking. And again, all of a sudden, I just felt God speaking to my soul. And I looked at this, I go, man, this is like amazing. This is like an image of how we walk with the Lord. So I want to play a bit of that, and I'm going to give you a bit of a commentary, okay? Turn up the volume, too. Now look at these precious little babies.
Kisses on your hands. Come here. Yeah, that was a big owie.
Okay, pause it right there. Do I need to explain this to you? You following me? Okay, I thought you were. But since I'm here, I'm going to explain it anyways. Now, think about that imagery. On the path of life, sometimes, we take this journey, and sometimes we're running maybe faster than we should be, and stuff happens along life's path, right? Where we experience some sort of pain, right? I just wonder sometimes that we don't fully see that experience of pain like God sees that and how he responds to us. When I was videotaping that, I just love the imagery of the care, because this is what love looks like. This is what a jealous God looks like. That love who encompasses us and is right there in the moment of our pain, right? Sometimes we even wonder, and you might be here this morning, he's like, I don't know, where is God? I'm experiencing me. I don't know where he is. I don't experience it to the level that I wish I could. He's right there. He's right there. Okay, let's keep going. This is fun.
Good little trick there, little one.
Now, okay, notice the obvious here. Okay, what's happening here now is obviously Kathy takes her by the hand, takes the other one by hand, and the continuing of the journey happens, right? There's little giggles, the journey happens, and the presence of a loving God is always there, even in the stumbles. Pause. I know you're already drawing your own conclusions that my grandchildren are so sweet. But beyond that, the spiritual conclusion that in this journey, there's so many things to unpack about how God walks with us and carries us. What you see in this next part, though, is along the way, I started to realize that God reveals stuff and points out beauty along the way that so often we might miss. we might not even see. And so what you have here is Kathy pointing out, look at the beauty of this flower, and that pause takes place. Now remember, this is like just seconds after a fall and a cry and a scrape my knee. Well, I can't unchange the scraped knee. I can bring healing to it and restore you on that way. Now let's look at some of the beauty. Here we go. Okay, let's go this way. Now, as we keep watching it, just keep it rolling. So now there's a plane coming in the sky, right? And so Kathy's going to point out, look at how Sophie is tentative to go to the edge, right? And now there's a whole nother of, wow, look at this plane. All right, let's pause it there. Again, as I was watching that, I was going, oh man, so many times I have missed those moments where God takes me to the edge, so to speak, and shows me something that is just magical. And it's right there. He's right there. And he's wanting to show me something that is so majestic, so beautiful. And the kids are just like, wow, it's the plane, right? And so when you see this unfold, you see this wonderful journey that is almost like real life. There's ups and downs, scrapes and bruises. Sometimes God's carrying you. Sometimes he's showing you. He's in this journey showing you, holding you, allowing you to see what it's like at the edge, bringing you back to the path. And when I was watching that, I thought, you know what? This is exactly how Elkanah, a jealous God, desires to walk with us. His love is unwavering, unchanging. He invites us to experience that. And you might be here this morning going, I'm not really sure. Listen, as you're in this journey to follow God, you're reciprocating that love and joy. But you got to start with what it looks like from God's point of view. His love for you will never change. His desire for you will never change. His passion for you will never change. It's phenomenal. It's deep. It's rooted in all that God is and who he is. And when he looks at you, his desire for you is to have all of you. And as you experience that reciprocating joy and you find yourself in his arms, you're going to find completeness in him. And you're going to find that in that journey, as difficult as it gets, you're going to see God pointing out some wonderful things. And part of the time he's holding your hand, part of the time he's carrying you. And even when the doctor gives a bad report or you're in a horrible relationship, God is there. And the depth of his love will never change. Will never change. Now, I'm going to wind this up, and I'm trusting the power and presence of the Holy Spirit to make that real to you, because it feels like my words are frail and feeble as compared to what I feel in my heart. That passion that God has for us does never change. I don't know where you are in your spiritual journey this morning, whether you're watching online or you're here today. Maybe you just wandered in, stumbled online to SJA. And you're looking at this church and you're seeing what's going on. You're hearing the message, or maybe you walked in today and it's the first time and you don't fully get what's going on. Here's what I want you to hear. God loves you. That desire for you is unquenchable. He will never let it go. And he's running hard after you. His desire for you is massive. What he invites you to is to respond back to him, to accept that love, to see him, to come running into his arms and let you carry him along the journey. So for those of you that have been in the pathway of faith, this is a word of encouragement to keep the course to keep accepting his love. If you're new, what I'm inviting you to do is take a step towards God, wherever you are in that journey. Just one step towards God. And the way we're going to do that this morning is there's a song that, again, that I stumbled on. I was listening to this group, Maverick City, and I came across this song, My Heart Belongs to You. And as I was just thinking about this morning, I was going, what a beautiful way to end. We're going to play the song, and I want you just to sit, and I want you to listen, and I want you to just to respond to God, just in that giving my heart, giving my soul, giving all that I am to Jesus and responding to him. And whatever that means for you, if you need to stand, if you want to come up front here, if you want to kneel down, if you just want to sit, and whenever you're ready, you just leave. But here is my desire this morning for you, is that you receive that word, that you accept it, and that you respond to that love. And again, just in its simplest form as a poppy. You know, I love loving the kids, and that will never change. But when I call them by name and they turn around, they come running and sit in my lap and hug me back, there's nothing I will not do for those little kids. Their well-being is at the top of my priority, and I will protect them as best I can from anything. Now, you can only imagine the creator of the heavens and the earth when he looks at you like you look at that baby, and he gives everything for you. Now, this morning, when we close, just find yourself giving it back. Give your heart. Respond back to God. Say, here I am, Lord. I give you all that I am back to you.